Austin. Thank you so much for joining us on Healthy Minds, Healthy Lives. I'm your host, Nadirah Nazeer. Today, my guest is a retired CEO, author, and leadership coach, Joseph Iannicelli. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Nadir. It's a pleasure to be here.
Did I pronounce your last name correctly? I know we were practicing before.
It was absolutely perfect. Thank you.
Excellent. So we're going to talk about cluttered mind. So first, let's define what is a cluttered mind.
So you're asking me what a cluttered mind is?
Yes.
Well, let me answer that by saying I don't think we can actually declutter our minds, which means our minds are always cluttered. And what I mean by that is our minds are a wonderful thing. They have the unique ability to add things and multiply things, but they cannot subtract and divide. We cannot take away from what we learn. We can forget things, but we can't take away what we learn. We can't take away thoughts that are in there. Okay, so we are constantly cluttering our mind, mostly with thoughts, emotions, and all kinds of different things, information from various media sources, etc. So our minds are arguably always cluttered. Okay, so we can't declutter it. And even if we really wanted to declutter our minds, think about it. We can't, because if I ask you, Nadirah, right now, do not think about something. Do not think about a pen. Don't think about it. What do you do?
Of course, I'm thinking about that pen right now.
Exactly. So you can't declutter your mind. So your mind is always cluttered. Okay. So the question is not why or even how is it cluttered. We should just automatically assume that it is with all of these things that we just talked about. So then we need to think about, okay, well, what actually happens when our mind is cluttered? Because it's cluttered all the time. So if it's cluttered all the time, what happens with it if we don't deal with it properly, which we will talk about a little bit later on? A few things happen. One is stress. We get stressed when our mind is cluttered. We get anxious when our mind is cluttered. There's physiological things that happen, like our sleep is disrupted. Our digestive system doesn't work. We are forgetful, okay? And if you think about extreme cases of some of these symptoms like stress and anxiety, when we are extremely stressed, our sympathetic nervous system is activated, which means that blood is rushed to the parts of our brain that needs to react because it's stressed. Think of an example of maybe running, I don't know, running through a path and encountering a fox or a coyote or something that just scares you right away. Okay, you automatically go into an instinct of either wanting to fight, flight, or freeze. One of the two. And your brain reacts to say, okay, I gotta flee. I gotta run away. I gotta get away from here. And your blood rushes to those areas of the brain. Now, what happens to the other areas that are normal, like your digestive system, as an example, your systems that are not necessarily for survival at that moment do not function as well as they would normally be functioning if you weren't under that kind of stress. So all these things are happening. So psychological stress is the same, works in the same manner. If you are psychologically stressed, same things happen. That's why when you're psychologically stressed, you don't sleep well. Your digestive system is upset. Same symptoms happen. So you want to work at not decluttering your brain, but at dealing with your cluttered brain in order to function more properly.
So let's talk a little bit more about the cluttered brain. And I want to let my viewers know that this is going to be a two-part episode. So for today's episode, we're going to talk about clutter, what it means, the different symptoms. And the second episode, we're going to talk about how to declutter your mind. So you want to stay tuned for the next episode as well, too. So for this one, let's talk a little bit more. So you touch on a few things about what is cluttered. It stresses you, anxiety, disrupt your sleep, and there's also a lack of self-care and forgetfulness that
Yeah.
happens.
Yeah.
And I want to maybe paint the picture for a lot of people. Oftentimes we are in a situation where our mind is constantly going all over the place, where we're not feeling present and we're feeling extremely frustrated.
Mhm.
And what I've noticed, Joseph, as human being, what we tend to do, especially if somebody's late to something, the moment they get to where they're supposed to be late, instead of saying, thank you for waiting, they will rehash the whole story as to why they were late, which
Sure.
just doesn't help you.
Yeah, and in that particular situation, it won't help you because you are reliving the circumstances that stressed you in the first place. And you are late, maybe because you're forgetful. You're late for various reasons. And what causes you stress? I mean, think about it. Anything can cause you stress. It could be, just being late, could be traffic, could be, a million things that we can talk about. But if you, in your particular example, if you are late and then you get somewhere and say, instead of saying, I'm sorry, I'm late. Thank you so much for waiting. And let's, move with or continue with what we're supposed to be doing, whether it's a meeting, whether it's an appointment, etc. If you, like you said, go in there and say, okay, I'm sorry I was late. The traffic on the highway was terrible, or this happened, or my child wouldn't wake up this morning. If you go through all these things, you are reliving it, and you may be actually be causing a little bit of stress from the other side, because they're saying, well, wait a minute, this person, depending on the meeting, I guess, imagine it for an interview. The person might be saying, well, this person gets frazzled pretty easily, and they're still frazzled, as opposed to saying, they were late, child wasn't feeling well, but they seem all calm now. They dealt with it, they arrived, and they're ready. So you make a very good point there.
So what I would like the viewers to start maybe being conscious and aware about is the clutterness. So think about it. Tell me what you think about this, Joseph. When you have a desk, and I'm like literally looking at my desk right now, it's looking better than usual. Normally, there will be like a pile of papers. There will be a bunch of other stuff here, and it's still there. It's cluttered, but the moment that I will clean it up, I feel better. And I feel we should do the same thing, the same way that we are cleaning up the desk, the house. We should definitely make an effort to do the same thing for our mind. But the first thing we need to understand is what is preoccupying our mind. Why are we so cluttered? And start working through each one of them.
Okay, so let's think about for a second, and I'll ask you a question, and then we can answer it together. What clutters your mind? Forget your desk for a second, the physical space. What clutters your mind, in your opinion?
For me, I find that, well, I think I've shared that before on the show. I am going through menopause. So it's such an experience. And I want to talk about this. I want to normalize this. Every woman go through menopause. Let's normalize this conversation and let's talk about it. There is so much that happens to a woman that never happened before that is happening to me right now. And I'm so aware of it. Oftentimes, all of a sudden, I wake up in the morning, nothing has changed, and I feel overwhelmed. All I did was waking up,
Hmm?
and I feel overwhelmed. Then I ask myself, why am I feeling overwhelmed? I don't know. And that's why I think it's hormonal, because nothing has changed from last night. And last night, I might have gone to bed feeling great. So what's bothering me today as a woman who's menopausal may be different to somebody else that is cluttering their mind. And I find what I personally need is I need to write things down. When I write things down, I'm kind of putting all my thoughts on paper, and that helps me. And I think with cluttering of mind, it could be anything from your responsibility at home, your whatever personal thing you're going, or through work stuff or social things. Because we are constantly telling ourselves different stories throughout the day.
So let's go back to your waking up for a second, because that's a good point. When you say nothing has changed, that's why you're feeling the way you are. Nothing has changed, because what is in your mind is still there. Okay. What has actually changed is your attitude with dealing with what's in your mind. Now, some of it can be hormonal, and I cannot comment on that. I'm not an expert. But what I can say is if you go to bed comforted or comfortable, and you wake up anxious and you say, well, nothing has changed. Yes, it has. How you're dealing with what is in your brain and what your circumstances are has changed. Your attitude towards dealing with it has actually changed. So for me, when someone says, well, what clutters your mind, I'll say anything and everything. Like every experience I have is in my mind. Driving, mowing the lawn, dealing with my grandchildren, working on, a presentation for my book. That all clutters your mind. Where we get overwhelmed is when it all comes sort of together at the same time, and we think, wow, this is just so much. So for me, it could be anything from high interest rates, okay? The cost of borrowing. I got kids with mortgages. They're worried, and if they're worried, I'm worried for them. That will occupy my mind. If I'm ill, or if one of my kids are ill, or if someone that I know is ill, a family member, that occupies your mind because you may have a role in their recovery. Not being able to find a daycare. My daughter is looking for a daycare for her child. That's stressful. That could be something that could, clutter your mind. It could be, think about when a piece of technology doesn't work. Your phone doesn't work, or your washer doesn't work. That could occupy your mind or preoccupy you in your mind. So I would argue that there's anything that could occupy your mind will clutter your mind. It's how you deal with it that is the most important part. Think about fear for a second. Let's talk about fear for a second. Fear is probably one of the largest clutters of our mind. If we are fearful of something, it'll overwhelm us. It's not just everything coming at us at the same time, having multiple things to do or multiple appointments to do or juggling, a million things. Just the fear of something could paralyze us. So yeah.
Yeah, I just want to go quickly back. So what you're saying to me, even though I went to bed
Yeah,
feeling good, when I woke up in the morning, I feel anxious, is because what's been in my head?
sure. Because what's in your head is the same as when you went to bed. It's how you're dealing with it causes you anxiety. Because you went to bed with whatever was in your head. Now you might have dreamed a few things, you might have added a few things to whatever's in there, but then when you wake up anxious, you're anxious because of what's still in your head from last night. It's just how you're dealing with it.
So okay. And I need to reflect on that. The other thing that I want to talk about is the media, how it's
Yep.
contributing to the clutter.
It
We are a scroll society. That's what we do. We keep on scrolling. I don't know. I think an average of time is what, 5 hours a day, something like that. It was ridiculous amount of hours that a person on average spend scrolling on social media.
I'm not surprised. So if I may, the media plays a huge role in the cluttering of our minds because we just have so many different mediums now to learn things from, or to occupy us, or to entertain us. And we seem to need a device or a medium to do all of those things now. It used to be some of those things were more physical, like, you would entertain yourself by playing a board game, or having a conversation, or doing things like that, more physical in nature. Now we entertain ourselves just by games, or crossword puzzles, or Wordle, or whatever's popular these days. I'm not sure. So we use those mediums to not only entertain us, but to learn things from. And there's more of them. Okay, there's streaming services now. Streaming services were supposed to replace TV. Well, people are still having TV and multiple streaming services. So you're actually adding. You're not taking away much. So what happens is you got all of these things bombarding us. But more importantly, Nadirah, I think, is this constant pressure and need to know more and learn more and be better. Okay. So, and because of that, there's this constant need that I got to know more. And if someone says, well, how can you not know about that? It's like, well, where would I find that? So you're always constantly even in search, not just being bombarded. So there's a push-pull thing happening. It's pushed upon you, but it's also you pulling it in, saying, I need to learn more about this. I need to research this more because I need to know just as much as somebody else. I need to understand more. I need to get different perspectives, et cetera, et cetera. So all of this is coming in. By the way, this is all coming in at the same time as your life is happening. So you're still dealing with your kids if you have them, and you're dealing with your school, you're dealing with your work, you're dealing with a bad boss, you're dealing with, a colleague that's trying to undermine you, you're dealing with, a leaky roof, you're dealing with life, and you're being bombarded by all these things. So that's a ton of stuff happening at the same time, and that really clutters your mind. And then that's when you start to get paralyzed, and that's when you start to get fearful of things. I fear that I don't know this. I fear that my, the leak on my roof's gonna, cause damage. I fear that the insurance company's not gonna pay up. And your brain just continues to gallop into this never-ending cycle of, wow, what's gonna happen? I feel fearful. And then God forbid, something gets thrown at you last minute when you finally think you have something under control, and it's like, well, you get a phone call from someone and say, can you do this for me right now? Or can you pick up my child from daycare because I can't? It's like, what just happened? And it just throws you for a loop, and your productivity is thrown off. Physically, we talked about the physical effects earlier. Physically, you're thrown off, and you're just not as productive, and it stops you from being who you really are, and being the best you can be.
So I want to pull back and paint this image. Tell me what you think. I think we live in two worlds, the physical world and the story we tell ourselves in our head. It's two different worlds. We are constantly telling ourselves certain story that may not necessarily be true, or what's happening in our physical world.
I think you're right. I also think that the story that you're telling you is true if you believe it to be so, whether it's actually true or not. And if you perceive it to be true, it's true. It's true to you. So that's why the story needs to be true to yourself and true to who you really want to be. So your mind and your body have to be always in sync. We talk about, I'm a yoga instructor, as you know, and some of the things we tell our students is try to make sure as much as possible that your mind and your body are in the same place at the same time, because quite often they're not. And when they're not, if your mind is floating around here, but your body is doing something here, you're not going to be as productive as you can be. And a lot of it has to do with a cluttered mind. When you have a cluttered mind, think about how you act. You can be doing something, you could be reading something, and it's going to take you 10, times the amount of time that's required to read something, to retain something, if your mind is not there, if your mind is cluttered with other things. Because you're worried about something else, but you have to read this. So you're not going to retain this because you're trying to add more and more and more and more, and it's just not absorbing. So yeah, I think you're right. We're living in a different world sometimes, and we have to kind of sync them up as much as possible.
And that's the difficult part, right? Because when you're syncing up, you we'll need to deal with so many different things like biases, trauma, triggers, how you perceiving stuff, how you receiving things, because we receive things based on who we are and through our lens. And that lens is made up of the trauma and the triggers.
Yeah, and it comes down to all of these things lead us to make decisions that we need to make that are best for us. And when you have a cluttered mind, or when you have the things that you just, going on that you just described, you may not make the best decisions that you can for you or others. And what I mean by that is in order to make good, clear decisions, you need to have a clear and quiet mind. And you actually need to, you need to think about being what your best circumstances would be at that particular time. So when you're making a decision, any kind of a decision, because we're a culmination of every single decision that we made in our lives. Okay, so assuming that we're good decision makers, then chances are we're in a good place in our life. So you make your best decisions with a clear mind. So if you have a cluttered mind, which we know we all always do have, okay, broadly speaking, that statement would lead to say, then we'll never make good decisions because we always have a cluttered mind. And if you make decisions with a cluttered mind, they're not good decisions. So let's declutter our mind to make good decisions. We realize, I think, I do, that you can't do that. You can't declutter your mind. So then how do you begin to make better decisions moving forward with a constantly cluttered mind? And that's the question that we need to answer. And there are things that you can, do to help you. And we can talk about that for sure. And I'm sure we actually will talk about that. But to make good decisions, to lead a better life, you need a clear mind.
And Joseph, this is something very significant here, and I want the viewers to really ponder on this statement. We are exactly where we are right now based on all the decisions that we've made in the past.
Yes.
Every single decision. So everyone, where you are right now, it's actually cumulative based on all the small, big decisions that you've made is where you are. So I know there's a lot of people that likes to play the victim. I can understand there's some unusual sometimes circumstances like what happened with you are where you are. But for majority of the time, you are exactly where you are because of the decision that you've made or lack of decision.
Yeah. Well, not making a decision is a decision in itself. So what I would say to that is you're exactly right. And if you are in a good place, and this is what I would, encourage the audience to think about possibly, is if you are in a good place, then you cannot regret any decisions that you've made, because every decision that you've made, good or bad at the time, maybe, you could have think, it wasn't a good decision, has led you to a good place, which is right now. And if that bad decision at that point in time was a different decision, it would not have led you to where you are now, because it would have been a different path, because that's just the way life works. So if you're in a good place, then every decision that you made, good, bad, or ugly, has led you to a good place. You can't really regret many. But if you are in a place where you're not as happy as you should be or want to be, and you're just not where you think you should be, then you cannot really change past decisions, but you can make better decisions moving forward, which will get you into a place that you want to be. So not, you wouldn't necessarily look back, because what you've done has got you here. So what you need to do is things that will get you somewhere else where you want to be.
I'm chuckling right now because I'm thinking I put on some weight. And I'm like, that's because I overate. So if I want to lose the weight, I should probably eat less and go to the gym. And
Yeah,
again,
for
it's
sure.
a decision that I've made in the past that added those extra pounds on me. So I know exactly what I did or didn't do, which is overeating and less exercise. But moving forward, like today, I only had yogurt. So that moving forward, I can make good decisions that will lead me to the path of losing those few pounds. We have a couple of minutes left here, but I want to ask you, what are the top 3 signs of a cluttered mind?
Constant state of fear, fear of failure, fear of no accomplishment, that sort of things. Um, Paralyzed, probably. I see a lot of people that are just paralyzed. They're overwhelmed. They have so many different things happening that they just do nothing. Like, how many people do we know that, they just freeze when there's so many different things to go? So I think that's it. Probably, I mean, making bad decisions, maybe. But disillusionment, I see a lot of people who are disillusioned when they're overwhelmed and just they're cluttered because there's just so much there that they can't pick out the things that are important at that time to make better decisions. So those are probably my top ones.
Thank you for that, Joseph. Thank you. So we talk a lot about clutter mind today. Please stay tuned for the next episode, and you want to watch that next episode that's going to come up to talk about the decluttering of your mind. So today I wanted to really spend the time to talk about what is a cluttered mind and how it affects you. And the next episode, we're going to be talking about decluttering of your mind. So on that note, I want to say, Joseph, thank you so much for joining us today. I appreciate it. And I look forward to continue that conversation for part 2. And for my viewers, thank you for joining me today. I'm always looking forward to sharing great information with you. And on that note, I want to tell you, stay positive and start believing.